Let's deep dive.
Hey friends, and welcome to another deep dive with Erin. I am your host, Erin. Thank you so much for being here. As always, thank you for the love and support on my previous videos, and if you listen to the podcast as well, thank you so much. I want to start off with, as always, I never mean any kind of disrespect to any of the families or victims involved. My reason for making these videos is simply to send some kind of awareness out so others, if they see these things, they can pick up on those red flags as well. Again, no disrespect is meaning. This story, though, is going to be a little bit on the heavy side. We will be discussing SA, so if that is something triggering to you, please X out of this video. We'll see you in another one. Keep your mind and your heart not heavy like this story is. And with that said, we will be discussing the story of the girl in the basement, also known as the Elizabeth Fritzl story. On April 9th, 1935, Joseph Fritzl was born in Austria to parents Joseph Fritzl Sr. and Mary Fritzl. He grew up as an only child, and he was raised solely by his mother. His father was an alcoholic and left the family when Joseph was just 4 years old. It was later found out that his father, Joseph Sr., was killed in battle during World War II and likely died in action in 1944. His mother, Mary, was not the most loving mother. She said she had Joseph just to prove that she was not infertile because her first marriage ended because she did not bring a child to it. She felt Joseph was a burden and she was forced to look after him, which is really just sad. Who thinks like that? Joseph had struggled his whole life to form a relationship with his mother. He began to have severe anxiety during the war when the bombing raids were over their home. His mother refused to hide with him. She would just send him to the shelter by himself. He developed ways to cope with life, which, as we find out soon, was not a healthy way to cope. At the age of 21, Joseph married 17-year-old Rose Marie. The couple went on to have 7 children, 3 sons and 4 daughters. Elizabeth was born on April 6, 1966. Joseph began SAing her in 1977 when she was just 11 years old. Elizabeth ran away from home in 1983 at the age of 15. She went into hiding with a friend from work in Vienna. She was found 3 weeks later and the police returned her to her parents. On August 28, 1984, Joseph lured Elizabeth down to the family's basement. He said he needed help carrying a door that he was replacing. Elizabeth held the door while Joseph fixed it into place. As soon as he attached the door to the hinges, he struck. He held an ether-soaked towel to her face until she was unconscious and threw her into the makeshift chamber that he had created. As the day went on, Rosemary feared that she may have ran away again, so she filed a missing persons report with the police. Her father told the police that she likely joined a religious cult because she had talked about it before. Nearly a month later, Joseph gave the police a letter, one of many he would make Elizabeth write. The letter stated that she was tired of living with her family and was staying with a friend. She warned her parents not to look for her or she would leave the country for good. Joseph would head down to the basement every morning at 9 a.m. His family believed this was for work that he was so dedicated to doing. But for Elizabeth, it was torture and monstrous. For the first 2 years, he left her alone, only keeping her captive from her family and the outside world. But then he began to R her, just like he did when she was 11 years old. Shortly after this began, Elizabeth became pregnant. She miscarried 10 weeks into the pregnancy. 2 years later, she became pregnant again. In August of 1988, she gave birth to a baby girl she named Kirsten. 2 years later, another baby was born, a boy named Stefan. The 2 children lived in the chamber with Elizabeth. Joseph brought down weekly rations of food and water. Elizabeth attempted to teach them what she could, and she tried her hardest to give them a good lifestyle, even though they were in this horrific circumstance. Over the years, Elizabeth gave birth to more children. After Elizabeth gave birth to her fourth child in 1994, her father Joseph decided to expand the chamber that he built for her. It went from 380 square feet to 590 square feet. He made Elizabeth and the two older children dig soil with their hands for years to make this extension. The next child she would give birth to died shortly after being born. She then had 3 more. These children would end up living upstairs with Rosemary and Joseph. In order to conceal what he had been doing, he had to lie to Rosemary, his wife. He would place the children in bushes or on the doorstep, and he would have them swaddled with a note that he would force Elizabeth to write. She would write that she couldn't take care of the baby and leaving with the parents to take care of, and then Rosemary would call their version of CPS each time one of these children arrived. Social services found nothing wrong, so they allowed the grandparents to keep the children. Eventually, Joseph would give Elizabeth things in the chamber to give to the children. They had a television, a radio, a tape player, a refrigerator, and a hot plate. He would punish them, though, by shutting off the lights and refusing to deliver food for days at a time. He even told them he would gas the chamber with them in it, and he had an electrocuted door so they couldn't touch it. That way, if they tried to escape, they'd be dead. On April 19th, 2008, Elizabeth begged with her father to allow her 19-year-old daughter Kirsten to go to the hospital because she had fallen unconscious in the chamber. Elizabeth helped her father Joseph carry her daughter Kirsten upstairs and out of the chamber. This was the first time in 24 years Elizabeth was let out of that room. He forced Elizabeth to go back down into the chamber after they got Kirsten upstairs. He called for an ambulance to come pick up Kirsten. She was taken to the hospital where she was admitted with kidney failure. Joseph arrived at the hospital with, oh my God, a note from Elizabeth explaining what had been going on with her condition. But the medical staff, they did not believe Joseph. They knew something was wrong. So on April 21st, they called the police. The police questioned Kirsten. And they made an appeal to the public to please have Elizabeth come to the hospital so they could get Kirsten's medical history. The police also reopened the case file on Elizabeth's disappearance. Elizabeth pleaded with her father to please allow her to go to the hospital and be by her daughter's side. On April 26th, Joseph let her out of the chamber again. He then took Elizabeth to the hospital to be with Kirsten. As soon as Kirsten's doctor saw that Elizabeth and Joseph were there, he immediately called police. The police came down and they detained both Elizabeth and Joseph. Elizabeth was tight-lipped during the investigation, so police came at it a different way. They told her that they would promise she would never have to see her father again. All she had to do was tell them her story. Over the next 2 hours, she told the horrific story of how she was held captive and SA'd for over the past 24 years. Shortly after midnight, the police said their investigation was done, and they walked into the room and arrested Joseph. During the evening of April 27th, Elizabeth, her children, and her mother were taken into care. Police said Joseph told them how to enter the basement chamber through a small door and open with a secret keyless code. On April 29th, it was announced that the DNA evidence confirmed that Joseph was the biological father to all of Elizabeth's children. On March 16th, 2009, Joseph's trial began. He pled guilty to all charges with the exception of murder or grievous assault by threatening to gas his family if they disobeyed him. On the first day of testimony, the jurors heard 11 hours of recorded testimony from Elizabeth. These recordings are said to be just horrifying, so much so that 8 jurors did not watch more than 2 hours of video at a time. It is said on the second day of testimony, Elizabeth showed up in disguise because she did not want to see her father ever again or him see her. But rumor has it, they locked eyes and Joseph went pale. The following day, he went straight up to the judge and said he pled guilty to every charge. He wanted this to be over. On March 19th, 2009, Joseph was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility for parole for 15 years. He accepted the sentence and he did not appeal it. He is currently serving his sentence in the Garston Abbey. After the trial, Elizabeth and her 6 children were moved to an undisclosed town in northern Austria. They live in like a fortress type house, which completely understandable for the torture and trauma she went through for 24 years. Other family members have stated that Elizabeth and her children are enjoying life together now. And that is the true story of the girl in the basement, also known as Elizabeth Fritzl. I know this one was a bit of a heavy one, and if you made it this far, I just want to say thank you for being here and listening to this story. Something like this is just horrific and should not be happening to anyone, especially a parent doing this to a child. It's wrong. Anyway, guys, thank you so much again for being here. Until next time. Bye.
Let's deep dive.